RuneScape is an MMO created and published by Jagex, a gaming company founded by Andrew Gower. Of course, it was later learned that Andrew Gower was actually just a collection of microscopic single-celled spore-like organisms that had formed together to create a sort of collective superbody hive mind. These billions of spores have since sold their stock in Jagex and dispersed to reproduce via podlings all across the world, but that's all another story for another day. Almost every online game on the planet suffers to some extent to automated botting programs giving players unfair advantages, but to say that RuneScape has a problem with botting is sort of like saying that people have a problem with breathing underwater. RuneScape doesn't have a problem with botting, it has a functioning symbiotic relationship with it. There has historically always been so many bots in this game that it is boggling. Jagex and their players have always strived and wished for a RuneScape free of bots, but what kind of implications would there be for the game if, say, we were able to magically pluck all bots from it and prevent any bots from functioning in the future? The answer is pretty interesting and a bit harrowing even, so let's examine just that. In Colonello's video on the topic, he suggests that there are two types of bots. I'm in agreement with this, but I have my own two categories that are a little different from his. My categories are what I call the commercial botter and the personal botter. Every botter is either doing it commercially or personally, but let me explain just what I mean by this. Commercial botters are what most people tend to think of when they think of botting. These are the legions of default player characters running around in droves, mining rocks and chopping trees like goddamn locust plagues. These are the real scourge of RuneScape, and they're completely responsible for the heavily messed up economy and for the state that the game is in now, which is a state of more or less total reliance on these commercial botters. Commercial botters are a real issue because you can't really stop them. They're not personally deterred by being banned. The botter doesn't care if his random woodcutting minions get deleted. The botter just creates more. It's being done for commercial gain via selling gold accumulated by the bots. You can only slow a commercial botter down. Stopping them has proven almost impossible. The personal botter, on the other hand, are the players who only bot for personal gains on their account. This might be botting skills that they don't want to train, like divination or fire making, or it may be to get some cash for a new weapon or whatever. These players are harmful too, but not nearly to the same degree as the commercial botters. Even a player who bots millions of gold for his main account isn't doing the deep impact damage of the trillions of gold commercial botters are generating and selling every year. Jagex has historically punished botters deemed to be personal botters a little less strictly than commercial botters. Normally it's a temp ban, a first and last warning, and a random stat rewind on skills thought to have been botted. Bots deemed to be commercial botters generally just get the axe right away. So if we somehow reached into the game, both versions, and wiped out all of the bots, what would happen? Well, the obvious results would be an immediate market explosion. Supplies would drastically drop while demand would shoot through the roof. Raw trade goods like logs, fish, ores, runes, and other heavily botted commodities would see intense market fluctuations that, in my opinion, would probably never truly stabilize. In fact, despite how hated bots are by the players and developers of RuneScape, bots have ironically become a necessity at this point in the game's lifespan. Bots have built and maintained the RuneScape economy, and they give legitimate players an inexhaustible source of raw materials and other things that I believe most people take for granted. Imagine, for instance, that time you might have trained your prayer level up sometime in the past. Maybe you only trained it up a few levels, or maybe you trained it up to 99. You might have said to yourself, phew, that sure cost a lot to level my prayer to 99. I almost spent like 80 million gold on it. Yeah, okay, well now imagine that dragon bones cost around 10 to 15 times as much as they do right now, and also imagine that there isn't even enough of them on the market to actually get you to 99. Not only does the cost of commodities skyrocket, but supply can never truly be as great as it is now if you don't have around-the-clock legions of bots. It's true that without any bots, players would go out and try to farm things like dragon bones to get in on the skyrocketing market and the lack of supply, but it's very doubtful that legitimate players can stabilize a permanent loss of bots. After the major 2011 cluster flutterer bot nuke, for instance, prices exploded for every single highly botted item, and they never really truly went down until months later, once the bots had come back. The removal of bots has been attempted by Jagex before, but every time it's ended with basically disastrous results. I don't even need to mention the infamous free trade restrictions that nearly killed the game and didn't even stop botters. The major bot nukes Jagex tried doing around the 2011 era also had huge consequences on the game. Players reporting massive performance issues with the game client due to the anti-botting program that Jagex was running to detect bots. And guess what? It didn't even really stop bots. Bots have been introduced, and while they do deal a good blow to the gold sellers and haven't had any real negative effects on the game, they still failed to stop botters. Aside from all of this, there's also the issue of gold value. Gold value in RuneScape, in large part thanks to bots, has exploded over the last decade. It's only natural for MMOs to see the value of their players' currency drop over time as new forms of getting more and more gold are added to the game and the buying power of the gold drops in response. But RuneScape has such a messed up economy at this point that it's almost like gold is intrinsically worthless. If the bots that fueled this gold vanished, we'd not only have a lack of supplies, but also vast amounts of gold that has greatly diminished buying power. If you were wondering how situations like this work out in real-life economies, the answer is always really bad. Of course, gold sinks could be introduced to try deflating the amount of gold in players' hands and giving gold a more stable buying power, but that could theoretically take years to accomplish. The cold truth is that this game needs bots, and to another extent, it can't even get rid of them. To pose a hypothetical situation where all bots are magically zapped from the game would be like wondering what would happen if all factories and automated industry were zapped from the earth, because that's kind of what bots are in RuneScape. They're the automated factory robots that assemble all of our basic goods and tools. Could you imagine the human race having to make everything by hand? Could you imagine going to the Grand Exchange and finding that your order of rocktails never gets filled because there's just not enough goddamn rocktails to go around? Sure, some people can imagine a RuneScape without bots. There are plenty of people playing on Iron Man accounts after all. But what about for all those people who can't live without the bots? I don't know enough to truly answer this on my own, but I think for many players, the especially newer or lower leveled ones that the game desperately needs in order to keep growing, the lack of bots would lead to a much tougher and more vacant RuneScape. More things would have to be done by hand and with less money to do them with. For new players, this might seem too grindy and monotonous, and for all the old players who are fully acclimated to the bots, this might be a highly uncomfortable change that they never get used to. And not just any of that, but think about the money that bots make for Jagex. There have historically been moments in the game's life where bots were making up as much as nearly 50% of the current player population. That is goddamn insane. To remove all of these bots would be removing a huge portion of players. Bots with memberships are paying Jagex for those memberships, and at least free-to-play bots are, at least some of them, running the ads that play on the free-to-play clients. Bots bring in a not insignificant amount of money to Jagex. To remove all of those bots and then also factor in the players that would stop playing in the wake of the reformatted community and economy? Damn, man. Damn. Love them or hate them, it's pretty clear that bots are a necessity to RuneScape at this point. They've been afflicting the game for so long that they've virtually become an integral part of it. They're a huge part of its economy, like an economy that is essentially built on slave labor and automation. They've inflated gold worth to comical heights. Banning bots only slows them down, and taking more extreme measures to stop them or nuke them doesn't fully work and only brings great amounts of suffering to the legitimate players. The bottom line is that there's still a good amount of money to be made by botting and selling golden accounts, and as long as there's money that can be made, there are people who will make that money. Botting is an industry with costs and profits associated with its operations. The only way to naturally end botting would be if everyone just decided, I'm not going to buy gold from gold sellers anymore, and that's just simply not going to happen. So the relationship continues. Botters bot, Jagex occasionally bans some of them in what has become more or less just sort of a token show of anti-botting measures, and the players get access to a stable, predictable, and flowing supply of basic trade and skilling goods. It's almost impossible to correctly imagine what RuneScape would look like if you took out all of its bots. Personally, I think the repercussions would be deep running and would be felt for the rest of the game's lifetime. It's just the state of affairs at this point. Birds fly, grass grows, and botters commit green dragon genocides that would make Adolf Hitler get a boner.